Jeffrey Dahmer, Dennis Nielsen, Stephen Port, Mark Latunski, John Wayne Gacy, and now 19-year-old Jack Crawley from Carlisle, North England, another man to add to our roll call of sick-minded men who hook up with other men to murder them. We're not complaining about homosexuality, mind. Who gives a shit about that? Anyway, like his fucked up predecessors Stephen Port and Mark Latunski, Crawley, or Creepy Crawley as at least one person used to call him, targeted his victims through a well-known dating app. Born in either 2003 or 2004, Crawley grew up in Carlisle, which sits on the border between England and Scotland. Crawley claims that his descent into crime began at the age of 13 when he allegedly embarked on his career as a drug dealer. By 15, he was £5 in debt and claimed that he was being coerced and controlled by gangs into committing theft and other crimes. But those who knew Crawley knew the truth. The youth was a compulsive liar. What is true, notwithstanding, is the physical abuse that was perpetrated on Crawley as a child by his father, the boy's parents splitting up when Crawley was 12. Another truth is Crawley's fanaticism for serial killers, Jeffrey Dahmer, who murdered and dismembered as many as 17 boys and young men, all hookups of his, in the 70s and 80s in Milwaukee, USA, being his #1 idol. After Crawley was sent down, a former neighbour of his reported that they always called him Creepy Crawley, in secret that is, and that he used to do so many weird things, like walking around with his hood up on scorching hot summer days. If you're enjoying the video so far, do subscribe, give the video a like, drop a comment when you're ready, and donate. Hit the thanks button below, I'll appreciate you. By the age of 19, Crawley had grown into an imposing 6 foot 3 inches of height and was working as a security guard at Carlisle's Cumberland Infirmary. He also dealt weed on the side and often posted selfies on social media with wads of cash, neither of which might been particularly worrying, I'd say. Another man who worked at Cumberland Infirmary was 56-year-old Paul Taylor. A catering manager and Afghanistan Army veteran, Paul was a devoted husband and father of 2. He was also gay, or at least bisexual, and whether it was through their common workplace or through the gay dating app Grindr, Mr. Taylor and Crawley started hooking up for sexual encounters on a regular basis. So, once again, driving his blue Vauxhall Corsa on the 18th of October 2023, Mr. Taylor picked up his young hookup and then, under the suggestion of that hookup, he drove to a secluded area of woodland to have sex with his hookup. When they got there, his hookup bludgeoned him to death with a hammer without giving him any chance to either defend himself or escape. Once Crawley was certain that Mr. Taylor was dead, he dragged the man's body to the boot of the man's own car. From there, Crawley drove to a remote and desolate location that he was familiar with and tried to burn Mr. Taylor's body. He later claimed that the smell of the burning body made him vomit and faint several times, causing him to give up burning the body and bury what was left of it in a shallow grave. Crawley then wiped the car down, trying to get rid of as much of Mr. Taylor's blood as he could. He didn't want to spook his friend Marcus Goodfellow, after all, who was coming the following day to help Crawley deliver the car to the person who had agreed to buy it for £2,000. Obviously, that was something pre-planned.
This murder was carried out by you with an intention to kill, as the jury found by their verdict, when you used brutal and exceptionally severe violence. It was a murder for gain because you wanted to steal his car, and afterwards, with callous cruelty for the family and friends of the man you murdered, you took the body away and set fire to it before it was hidden.
The blood had to be completely cleaned away in order not to spook Marcus Goodfellow. The thing is though, when he and Marcus were on the way to the buyer the following day, they crashed. Then, on the 26th of October, or very soon after then, Crawley got nicked, and yet, shockingly, a few days later, even though police found DNA from Mr. Taylor on some of Crawley's possessions, police let Crawley go. They could prove that Crawley knew Mr. Taylor and that he had seen his older hookup shortly before the man's disappearance, but this wasn't enough to charge Crawley, since, for all the police knew at this point, Mr. Taylor may well still have been alive. As you can now see, they hadn't yet found Mr. Taylor's body. However, they imposed some strict conditions on Crawley's bail because, you see, the young man was by no means completely off the hook. Staying at his grandparents' house in Carlisle and reporting into the police station at regular intervals were the 2 most important rules that Crawley had to follow. On the 4th of January 2024, Crawley, having arranged a hookup through Grindr with another middle-aged man, went to Tool Station to buy a hammer to kill his hookup. Not going to hardware shops and not buying any lethal DIY tools weren't conditions of Crawley's bail. Only the tool station where he went shopping was in York. Yeah, guy didn't care about breaking bail. All he wanted to do was kill again. The wig that he wore as a disguise made him look like Hagrid from Harry Potter, some people said, while the fake European accent that he assumed, again to disguise his identity, was innovative, you might say. Anyway, after later attacking his hookup with a hammer, having travelled with his hookup to a secluded area of York for their sexual liaison and for Crawley to take the man's life, Crawley fled the scene barefoot and subsequently committed a burglary at a nearby home, stealing clothing, a backpack and a phone charger. When Crawley's second arrest took place, which was on the 2nd of February 2024, Crawley was in possession of a knife, in possession of a quantity of weed, and all the way down in Bath.
Jack Crawley, isn't it? Yep. So at this minute in time, as a result of police inquiries, I'm arresting you on suspicion of murder of Paul Taylor, aged 56, contrary to common law. So you do not have to say anything, but in my defence, if you do not mention when questioned something which you later rely on in court, anything you do say may be given evidence. Do you understand what I've just said to you? Do you have any reply to that? No. Thank you.
This time Crawley was arrested for murder, and he found it all so fucking funny. Just look at him mucking about while he's being charged, getting involved with whatever commotion is taking place a few feet away from him, acting like he hasn't got a care in the world. Ha! It's all a show. He doesn't want to be banged up, and absolutely everyone in the nick knows it. He's just not going to let it show. He wants to create the impression of being in a position of both confidence and control. On the 1st of May 2024, Crawley finally stopped denying the murder of Mr. Taylor and disclosed the body's location to the police. No idea why he chose to do that at that point, but thank freak he did, because it made the investigation and the charging a lot easier. Mr. Taylor's was in fact the one murder charge that the police brought against Crawley. You see, despite the many hammer blows that Crawley had rained down on the head of his York hookup during their countryside liaison, the man had miraculously and thankfully been able to wrestle the hammer away from Crawley and then run him off. Yay! The 15 years that Crawley got for that attempted murder is running concurrently with the 37-year life sentence that he got in October 2024 for Mr. Taylor's murder. And the lies that he told during his trial were the same as the lies that he told when he was 15. It was a gang made me do it.
Not content with that murder, you went on to attempt to murder another man. I'm satisfied that had that man not been so brave and strong enough, you would have murdered him too, as you had before. You are a highly dangerous young man.
And now for our second story of a man looking for hookups with murder on his mind.
50-year-old Mark Latunski remains jailed without bond, charged in Bacon's death.
There's so many signs along the way.
A half-naked man was reported running from Latunski's home in November. I sat down with Latunski's husband, Jamie Arnold, who says he had no knowledge or involvement in Bacon's death.
On Christmas Eve 2019, 25-year-old trainee hairstylist Kevin Bacon from Swartz Creek, Michigan, leaves his house for a date with a 50-year-old man who himself lives in the small rural town of Bennington, Michigan. 3 days later, the young man's body is found hanging upside down in the basement of his date's home with the throat slit and with bits missing. The murder and mutilation of Mr. Bacon by divorced father of four Mark Latunski has got to be the most shocking and gruesome crime to come out of Michigan for decades. To the outside world, the perpetrator seemed like an ordinary individual, his 12-year marriage, as I mentioned, having spawned no fewer than 4 children. However, behind closed doors, the perpetrator led a double life. He was active on dating apps like Grindr, a platform where men can connect with other men for sexual encounters. But in the perpetrator's case, such online interactions would take a much darker turn. The perpetrator then was known to use these platforms to seek out men for casual sex. But what was hidden beneath his digital persona was a deeply disturbing obsession. While he kept a relatively private life, reports suggest that the man had a history of mental health struggles, and some individuals close to the man reported that he often expressed dark fantasies. More details on the perpetrator's mental health issues and his sick fantasies are to follow. Kevin Bacon, meanwhile, had an open and loving family with whom he had reconnected over the Christmas holidays of 2019. Mr. Bacon was last seen leaving his family's home for a date with a man that he'd met on the Grindr app. Having not heard from Mr. Bacon by the next morning, however, and having consequently since become frantic with worry, his family reported him missing. The police search for Mr. Bacon led them soon enough to the perpetrator's home. What they discovered at the very Tyrrell Road property on the 28th of December 2019 was nothing short of horrific. Mr. Bacon's lifeless body was found in the perpetrator's basement. The young man had been stabbed multiple times and had had his throat slashed. But the horror didn't end there, since it was rapidly discovered that the perpetrator had also mutilated Kevin's body and cannibalised parts of it, namely all his genitalia. To be exact, the perpetrator had made Mr. Bacon's penis and testicles into a fry-up. The perpetrator also divulged to the police that he'd been planning to use his victim's blood and bones as plant fertiliser, while his intended use for Mr. Bacon's muscles was as the ingredients for jerky. Suspending Mr. Bacon's body upside down from the ceiling was, some psychological experts say, the perpetrator's way of exercising dominance over his victim, even after the young man's death, Mr. Bacon having already been dead before this particular act. These grotesque details stunned the public and left many struggling to comprehend how someone could commit such unspeakable deeds. The divorce filings by the perpetrator's ex-wife, Emily Latunski, detail the perpetrator's two prior diagnoses from 2010 and 2012 respectively of severe recurrent and chronic major depression with psychotic features, adjustment disorder with depression, anxiety with paranoid schizophrenia, and borderline personality traits. The man's condition can be treated with medication, but according to his former wife, the man has a history of not taking it. In a 2013 filing, 2013 being when her divorce from the perpetrator was granted, Emily Latunski reported that when the perpetrator didn't take his medicine, he'd watch torture and horror movies, talk to himself, stay out all night, threaten to get rid of his children's animals, claim their son wasn't his child, and fail to shower and shave. Emily also claimed that the perpetrator kidnapped his own children by failing to follow custody plans, kept her and her children from leaving the home, made frivolous claims to Child Protective Services, and alleged that she and her brother were trying to murder him by poisoning a well. It was discovered, moreover, that Mr. Bacon was not the perpetrator's first target. A man called James Carlson filed a federal lawsuit against the perpetrator in 2020, in which he claimed that the man had chained him up in his basement in October of 2019. After escaping, he called 911. In November of that same year, another man whose name isn't known fled similarly from the perpetrator's home. On calling 911, the man reported, quote, "I'm trying to get away from some creepy guy. He had me tied up in his basement," unquote. I don't know what the police response to those two complaints were, but it looks like these were two missed opportunities to stop the perpetrator becoming a vicious, cannibalistic killer.
I never thought he was capable of such a horrendous crime.
Jamie Arnold talking about his husband of several years, Mark David Latunski. At Latunski's December 30th arraignment on charges related to Bacon's murder, Latunski claimed he was someone else.
My name is Edgar Thomas Hill.
I asked Jamie if this behavior was what he witnessed from Latunski before he moved out of their shared home in September.
There's so many signs along the way.
That you never saw at all during your relationship?
Not this, no. Yes, that there was something wrong.
It's not the first time police have been to Latunski's home in recent months. A half-naked man was reported running from Latunski's home in November. Michigan State Police determined that no criminal activity took place and said anything that happened was consensual.
Consensual? Like fuck! It's unclear what exactly led the perpetrator to commit his heinous acts. Some reports, however, suggest that, in line with his taste for extreme and violent pornography, his obsession with extreme sexual fantasies played a major role. Some former acquaintances of the perpetrator reported that the man had made disturbing comments in the past about cannibalism and violence. Again, though, it's unclear whether these were simply fantasies or part of a deeper and more dangerous urge. Whatever the cause of the perpetrator's acts were, his crimes against Mr. Bacon fill us all with shock, horror and disgust.
That breaking news, life without the possibility of parole. That's the sentence given to Mark Latunski for the murder and mutilation of 25-year-old Kevin Bacon. Latunski pleaded guilty to killing and mutilating Bacon in December of 2019.
The perpetrator's arrest led to an intense legal battle. The man was charged with first-degree murder, mutilation of a corpse and other serious offences. His trial was particularly high-profile because of the nature of the crime and the debate over his mental competency to stand trial. Many wondered if his mental health could be a mitigating factor. The relief that the perpetrator may have felt on being declared mentally incompetent to stand trial in 2020 didn't last. In 2021, in a reversal of its decision from 2020, the court deemed the perpetrator competent to stand trial. On subsequently being found guilty of first-degree murder, as well as of all his other charges, the perpetrator was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole. We're all glad about that, but of course, the pain and grief of Mr. Bacon's family and friends will never, ever end. Now for our third story, the shocking crimes of Stephen Port. On the 19th of June 2014, police attended a block of flats in East London in response to a call from a member of the public who reported that there appeared to be a young man collapsed on the street outside. One police officer in attendance noticed that the corpse that they had just found, which belonged to 23-year-old Anthony Walgate, a fashion student from Hull, had blood and bruising on the torso. The person who had called the police was the person who had drugged, raped and killed Anthony. Even when, in March 2015, the killer, a 40-year-old chef from Barking, England, was convicted for perverting the course of justice in relation to his very account of Anthony's death, he remained above suspicion for Anthony's death. How did the police repeatedly let gay date rape killer Stephen Port, known as the Grindr killer, slip through their fingers? Port was born in 1975 in Southend, Essex, England. Not long after he was born, his family moved to Dagenham on the East London-Essex border. Port was bullied at school and had no friends. He dropped out of art college and trained as a chef instead. He came out as gay in his mid-20s. Living alone in his Barking flat at the age of 40, he began his twisted use of gay dating apps and hookup sites. On the 17th of June 2014, Port hooked up with Anthony Walgate via the Sleepy Boy app, a platform where male escorts advertise their services. What Port subsequently told the police when they learned of the hookup, which was a week after they found Anthony's body, was that Anthony had died by his own hand by an accidental overdose of the drug GHB. The police accepted that Port had allowed a complete stranger to stay in his flat while he went out to work, and that he had, on returning home and finding Anthony dead, dumped his body outside out of panic. The police did take DNA samples from Port, as well as confiscating both his computer and Anthony's own. It turns out, though, that actually checking the two computers would have been too expensive for the police. Port's computer had logged the online searches that Port had made just before booking Anthony. Date rape drug, unconscious boys rape video, boys being drug raped. These and others were amongst Port's online searches. The police never found them, though, because they never checked Port's computer. 2 months after murdering Anthony and getting away with it with arguably farcical ease, Port rented his spare room to 22-year-old Slovakian Gabriel Kavari. Some days later, a woman out walking her dog discovered Gabriel's body in a graveyard a very short distance from Port's flat. Port had killed Gabriel with the same drug with which he had killed Anthony. Barking's gay community didn't at this point get any public warning about the threat to their members. Barking and Dagenham police hadn't linked the deaths of Anthony Walgate and Gabriel Kavari. Port used his FitLads profile to lure his third victim to him. Port suggested to 21-year-old chef Daniel Whitworth that they could go for coffee together before going back to Port's for dinner. Port's words to Daniel were, "So you can get to know me a bit first, so you know that I'm not some psychopath." Daniel's body was found with a suicide note confessing his apparent former relationship with Gabriel Kavari. According to the note, on the night that Gabriel died, both he and Daniel had been taking drugs together, and Daniel felt that he both could and should have saved Gabriel's life. Out of guilt, Daniel was ending his own life. The note also said not to blame the guy that Daniel had been with the night before. The police made no effort to trace that mystery guy. Daniel's body was discovered in the same graveyard in which Gabriel's body had been discovered, and it was discovered by the very same woman who had discovered Gabriel's body. The police failed to adequately investigate whether the handwriting in Daniel's suicide note was actually his own. Likewise, they failed to perform a forensic analysis of the blue bedsheet that had been found with Daniel's body. The police had Stephen Port's DNA in their database. If they had tested that bedsheet for DNA, they would very probably have found Stephen Port's DNA on it, since the bedsheet was, of course, Stephen Port's own. It was also discovered that Daniel's body had bruising on the arms and on the chest. Anthony Walgate's body also had visible injuries. Port only served 2 months of the 4-month sentence that he received in March 2015 for perverting the course of justice. In September 2015, 25-year-old Jack Taylor was found dead in a park by a graveyard. The police told his family that he'd overdosed on drugs. Port had met Jack on Grindr. Port's arrest, which came a month after Jack's death, was due not to the police but to Jack's 2 sisters, Donna and Jen. Donna and Jen were able to persuade the police to release images of the man captured walking with Jack on CCTV on the night of Jack's death. Donna and Jen had to battle to get the police to re-examine the CCTV footage after the police reported that it showed Jack later walking away from his companion. The person walking in another direction was someone else entirely. Donna and Jen knew their brother was someone who was anti-drugs. To them, the idea that he would go and sit in dirt in a park and inject himself to death was wholly preposterous. Knowing this of their brother, and having discovered through their personal investigation the cases of Anthony Walgate, Gabriel Cavari and Daniel Whitworth, Donna and Jen went back to the police again and again to campaign for an investigation into their brother's death. When the police finally did arrest Port, the perpetrator lied through his teeth.
So did you have any involvement in the death of the male that we just spoke about a short while ago, Gabriel Cavari, Gabriel Klein?
No, I did not.
So, were you involved in administering any drugs or poisons or noxious substances to him?
No, I don't administer drugs to anyone or give drugs to anyone. That's done at the party boy.
Might help if I show you a picture. We'll call this CRT2. This is Jack Taylor. Do you recognise that, mate?
No. No, I just don't recognise him. I don't pay full attention to the guys' faces when I have paid attention to the parties. This, but I don't recognise his face.
So you don't recognise his face?
I do not know. No.
Okay. And I mean that's Jack Taylor. So you don't recognise?
No, I don't.
Jack Taylor?
No.
Were the glaring and deplorable failings of Barking and Dagenham police in the matter of the evil savage Stephen Port, who will never be released from prison, due to them just not caring, possibly because the victims were gay, or due to constraints relating to budget and to other resources, or both? Whether or not any of the police officers involved in the case have been made to account for their failings, I can't say. If this video has gripped you, I recommend you to watch this one next. I'll meet you there.